The relentless Arizona sun beat down mercilessly upon Marcus Thornfield's weathered ranch, casting long shadows that seemed to taunt his profound isolation. At 48 years old, Marcus bore his grief like a searing brand etched deep into his very soul, marking him as a man who had lost everything that once gave his life meaning. His beloved wife Eleanor had perished while giving birth to their stillborn daughter 3 years prior, her final breath carrying away all the warmth and joy from his existence. What remained was merely a hollow remnant of the vibrant man he had once been, mechanically moving through endless days that stretched before him like an unforgiving desert wasteland. The ranch that had once echoed with Eleanor's melodious laughter and their shared dreams of children's voices filling every corner now resonated only with the mournful whistle of wind through barren rooms and the persistent creaking of weathered timber settling in the heat. Marcus performed his daily ranching duties with robotic precision, feeding the cattle, mending broken fences, checking the water holes, but his heart had been buried alongside his family. Most days, the only words he spoke were terse commands to his faithful horse, and even those were delivered with mechanical indifference. On that sweltering July morning, Marcus reluctantly rode into the bustling town of Deadwood for essential supplies. His jaw remained firmly set against the world's constant chatter and overwhelming bustle. The town pulsed with an energy that felt foreign to him now. Silver miners with dirt-stained faces, smooth-talking card sharps, and wide-eyed dreamers all chasing their fortunes in the oppressive desert heat. Saloons overflowed with raucous laughter and boisterous conversation, while persistent merchants hawked their various wares to anyone carrying coin in their pockets. He had grown to genuinely despise this place. All that vibrant life and infectious energy felt like a cruel mockery when his own world had grown so cold and eerily quiet. But harsh necessity demanded that he venture into town for ammunition, grain, and the whiskey that helped him sleep through yet another empty, lonely night in his desolate home. As he carefully tied his sturdy buckskin horse outside Patterson's general store, raucous laughter suddenly spilled from the Golden Slipper dance hall across the dusty, well-traveled street. Through the weathered batwing doors, he caught glimpses of painted women spinning gracefully with rough, unshaven men, their practiced smiles shining as bright as fool's gold under the flickering, unsteady lantern light. The old piano plunked out cheerful melodies while heavy boots stomped rhythmically on the warped, creaking floorboards. Something inexplicable made Marcus pause, his calloused hand resting on the store's worn door handle. Among the swirling, colorful skirts and thick cigar smoke, he spotted her, a girl who couldn't possibly be more than 15 years old. Her striking auburn hair was pinned back with severe precision, her pale, delicate skin standing out like fine porcelain among all the rouge and powder. While the other girls laughed and flirted with practiced professional ease, this particular one moved like a lost ghost haunting the living, her forced smile never quite reaching those haunted emerald eyes that held depths no child should ever know. Rose McKenna had learned to dance gracefully before she had learned to cry silently in the darkness. When cholera had swept mercilessly through their modest homestead 4 years back, it had claimed both her parents within mere days of each other, leaving her completely orphaned and utterly defenseless at the tender age of 11. Her uncle Vernon Caldwell and his calculating wife Stella Morrison had taken her in, not from genuine love or family duty, but from cold, heartless calculation and the promise of future profit. They had fed her just enough meager scraps to keep her alive, housed her in a cramped, closet-sized room barely fit for storage, and reminded her daily of exactly what she owed them for their supposed generosity. The moment Rose had turned 14, they had immediately put her to work in their seedy dance hall, claiming that every single bite of food and every scrap of shelter had to be earned through her labor. Dancing, they called it with false righteousness. Though Rose knew perfectly well what some men expected for their hard-earned dollar, she had learned to smile sweetly through grabbing hands and unwanted advances. She had mastered the art of dodging when possible, enduring when dodging failed completely. "Smile prettier, girl," Stella's voice would cut through the music like jagged, broken glass. These men don't pay good money to see long faces and constant sulking. Rose forced her lips upward into a practiced expression, swaying mechanically to the piano's repetitive rhythm, while her stomach churned violently with shame and persistent fear. A drunken miner grabbed her slender waist far too tightly, his whiskey-soaked breath hot and repulsive against her ear as he whispered crude suggestions that made her skin crawl with revulsion. She tried desperately to pull back without appearing rude or ungrateful. Rudeness always meant severe punishment later, and she had learned that lesson painfully well. Across the crowded room, Vernon counted money with calculating, predatory eyes, treating her exactly like valuable livestock at auction. Every single dollar in his pocket came directly from her degradation and humiliation, and he counted each coin with obvious satisfaction and growing greed. From his position in the doorway, Marcus watched the girl's subtle flinch with growing concern. He noticed the way she instinctively pulled back from grabbing hands, the unmistakable fear that flashed across her delicate features before she could hide it behind her practiced mask. Something powerful stirred deep in his chest, a protective fury he hadn't felt since Eleanor's tragic death, hot and sharp as a glowing branding iron. That evening, Marcus found himself back at the Golden Slipper, nursing a whiskey he didn't actually want at a corner table shrouded in shadows. He told himself he was simply avoiding another empty, sleepless night at the ranch, but his eyes kept finding the auburn-haired girl as she navigated the crowd like a frightened deer among hungry wolves. Her natural grace was clearly marred by obvious exhaustion, her movements mechanical rather than genuinely natural. When a particularly rough customer, a bearded teamster with cruel, mean eyes, cornered her near the stairs, pressing uncomfortably close and running his hands where they had absolutely no business being, Marcus moved without conscious thought. The protective instinct that had died with his family suddenly roared back to life with startling intensity. "Lady's not interested," he said quietly, his voice carrying the unmistakable authority of a man who had faced down rustlers, raiders, and everything else the harsh frontier could throw at him. The drunk wheeled around unsteadily, reeking of cheap liquor and unwashed clothes. "Mind your own business, old man. Girl's working here." Marcus stepped closer deliberately, his weathered hand resting casually on his gun belt. The gesture wasn't overtly threatening. It was simply a clear statement of fact. "This is my business now." The teamster took one long look at Marcus's cold blue eyes, noted the confident way he wore his well-maintained Colt, and decided he had somewhere else to be immediately. He stumbled away, muttering curses under his breath, but he went without further argument. Rose stared at her unexpected protector with obvious confusion and cautious hope warring in her expression. Men didn't help dance hall girls without wanting something significant in return. That was a lesson she had learned painfully well. Yet this weathered cowboy simply stepped back respectfully, giving her space to breathe. "Thank you, mister," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the piano's persistent melody. "What's your name, girl?" "Rose. Rose McKenna." "How old are you, Rose?" Her chin lifted defiantly, a spark of genuine spirit showing through the bone-deep wariness. "Old enough to work. Old enough to take care of myself." "That ain't what I asked." She studied his weathered face carefully, searching for the trap she had learned always existed somewhere. Finding only steady, genuine concern, she answered truthfully. 15. But I can handle myself just fine." Marcus felt his jaw tighten like a steel trap. No 15-year-old should have to handle this kind of work or this kind of life. Vernon Caldwell materialized like smoke, his thin face twisted with false courtesy and barely concealed menace. "Mr. Thornfield, isn't it? I do hope Rose hasn't been bothering you or interfering with your evening's entertainment." "Bothering me?" Marcus's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "She's being bothered plenty by your customers. Girl's barely grown and you've got her dancing with drunks and worse." Vernon's smile turned razor sharp, all pretense falling away completely. "Now see here. Rose works here by her own choice. She's family, and family takes care of family. We've given her a home, food, clothing, more than most orphans get. Family doesn't sell family," Marcus said flatly. "And choice ain't what I'd call it when the alternative is starving in the street." "How dare you?" Stella Morrison swept over like a painted vulture, her face a mask of indignation. Rose is our responsibility, our burden to bear. We fed and housed her since her dear parents passed, God rest their souls. Every penny you've spent on that ungrateful child and made her pay for every bite and every night's shelter, Marcus observed, his eyes never leaving Vernon's face. Rose stood frozen between them, watching her fate being decided by others yet again. But something was different this time. This stranger wasn't trying to use her. He was trying to protect her. She stays right where she is, Vernon declared, his voice rising. She's got debts to pay, obligations to meet. Years of feeding and housing don't come free. Marcus studied the man's greedy eyes, seeing him for exactly what he was. How much? The question caught Vernon off guard. What did you say? How much does she owe you? Name your price. Every cent you claim she's cost you. Vernon's eyes glittered with sudden avarice, smelling opportunity. He calculated quickly, enough to make the cowboy walk away, but not so much as to seem impossible. $750, cash money. It was highway robbery, more than most cowboys made in 3 years of hard work. Stella gasped at the sheer audacity of it. Rose's heart sank, knowing no one had that kind of money to waste on her. Marcus didn't even flinch. Done, but she comes with me tonight? The saloon went completely quiet around them. Even the piano player stopped mid-song, his hands frozen over the keys. Rose could barely believe it was real, as she gathered her few belongings from the tiny room behind the kitchen where she had slept for 4 long years. A faded blue dress that had been her mother's, her father's worn Bible with his name inscribed inside the front cover, and a small tintype photograph of her parents on their wedding day. Everything she owned in the world fit into a worn carpet bag. Her hands shook uncontrollably as she folded the dress, still half convinced this was some cruel dream. Men like Vernon didn't let their moneymakers walk away. Yet here was this stranger counting out silver dollars like they were nothing, buying her freedom without even knowing her full story. Why? She asked Marcus as they walked toward his horse under the star-filled desert sky. Why would you spend that much money on someone you don't even know? Marcus helped her onto his buckskin, his movements gentle despite his rough, work-scarred hands. Lost my own daughter before she could draw breath. Lost my wife too, bringing her into the world. Maybe this is God's way of giving me a second chance to do right by someone. The ride to his ranch stretched through moonlit desert, saguaro cacti standing like ancient sentinels in the silver light. Rose clung to the saddle horn, afraid to hope, afraid to believe this wasn't just another trap disguised as salvation. She had learned not to trust kindness. It always came with a price. When they crested a hill and saw the ranch spread below in the valley, a solid house with a wide porch, sturdy barn, fenced pastures where cattle grazed peacefully, she felt something she had almost forgotten: safety. It wasn't grand or fancy, but it was honest and real. It ain't much to look at, Marcus said, noting her silence. Just a working ranch, but it's clean and it's quiet, and no one will bother you here. It's beautiful, Rose whispered and meant every word. After years in that cramped room above a saloon, the open space and clean air felt like paradise. Days blurred into weeks, as Rose discovered what family truly meant. Marcus proved to be a patient teacher, showing her how to sit a horse properly, how to read the sky for weather signs, how to gentle a skittish calf. He taught her to shoot straight with his old rifle, to track animals through the brush, to find water in dry country. More importantly, he taught her that she had value beyond what men would pay for her company. She learned to cook more than the thin gruel they had fed her at the dance hall, tending a garden where vegetables grew fat and sweet. She discovered the pleasure of reading by lamplight without fear of interruption, of sleeping through the night without drunken voices below her floor. You don't have to earn your place here, Marcus told her one evening as they sat on the porch watching sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. You belong because I say you belong. That's how families work. Rose felt tears she had held back for months finally fall, hot and cleansing. I don't know how to be someone's daughter. Don't even remember what it felt like before they died. And I don't know how to be someone's father, Marcus admitted, his voice rough with emotion. Lost that chance before I ever got it. Reckon we'll figure it out together, though. Take it one day at a time. But their hard-won peace couldn't last forever. Evil men don't give up their profits easily, and Vernon Caldwell had tasted too much money to let his prize slip away permanently. They arrived on a scorching afternoon when the heat made the air shimmer like water. Vernon and Stella, but this time they weren't alone. Sheriff Daniel Crawford rode with them, his badge catching sunlight, legal papers folded in his shirt pocket. "Afternoon, Marcus," Crawford said, touching his hat brim. He had known Marcus for years, respected him as an honest man. "Wish this was a social call, but it ain't." "She's still a minor," Vernon declared, his voice thick with false righteousness. "We're her legal guardians, appointed by the county court when her parents died. She belongs with us." Sheriff Crawford looked uncomfortable, but determined. "I'm sorry, Marcus, but the law is the law. Girl's got to go back with her legal family." Rose stepped onto the porch, and Marcus felt his heart swell with pride. This wasn't the broken, frightened girl from the dance hall. Her spine was straight, her shoulders squared, her green eyes clear and fierce. She wore a simple cotton dress and boots, her hair braided back practically. She looked like what she was, a rancher's daughter. "I won't go back to that place," she said simply, her voice carrying across the yard with quiet authority. "You don't have a choice in the matter, child," Stella snapped, her painted face twisted with frustrated greed. "You're just a girl. Girls don't get to choose." "Everyone has a choice," Rose replied, moving to stand beside Marcus. "And I choose him. He's my father now, more than you ever were family." What followed wasn't the gunfight that frontier legends are made of. It was something rarer and more powerful. Word had already spread through the territory about the cowboy who had bought a girl's freedom and the girl who had found her courage. As the legal standoff stretched, riders appeared on the horizon. First came Mrs. Catherine Williams, the schoolteacher, driving her buggy with determined purpose. "We won't let you take that child back to such a place," she declared, stepping down with her skirt swirling. "Any Christian can see she's thriving here, learning proper skills and proper values." Behind her came rancher Thomas Mitchell and his wife Margaret, followed by the Andersons from the next valley over. More came, neighbors, their wives, even some of the more decent folks from town who had heard the story and rode out to take a stand. "She's getting real education here," Mrs. Williams continued, facing down the sheriff with schoolmarm authority. "Reading, writing, arithmetic, and practical skills. What was she learning in that dance hall of yours? Nothing a decent girl should know." "Look at her," added Margaret Mitchell, gesturing toward Rose. "Does she look mistreated or underfed? Does she look like someone who wants to go back to that life?" Sheriff Crawford found himself surrounded by the cream of the county's respectable citizens, all staring at him with expectant faces. His legal papers suddenly felt less compelling in his pocket. "The law says," he began weakly. "The law says a lot of things," interrupted Thomas Mitchell. "But right's right and wrong's wrong. Taking that girl back to work in a saloon ain't right, and every person here knows it." Faced with an entire community's united disapproval, Crawford made the only choice he could. "Maybe we should let sleeping dogs lie," he suggested, tucking the papers back into his pocket. "Girl looks happy and healthy here. Sometimes the spirit of the law matters more than the letter." Vernon's face flushed red with rage and frustrated greed. "This ain't legal. She owes us years of debt." "She don't owe you nothing but contempt," said old Samuel Roberts, the blacksmith. "We all know what kind of work you had her doing. Ain't a man here would let his daughter near your place." Seeing their scheme crumble without community support, Vernon and Stella retreated with empty threats of court action that everyone knew would never come. No judge would rule against the united testimony of the county's most respected citizens. As dust settled and neighbors began to disperse with promises to check on them soon, Marcus and Rose stood together on their porch, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. "You know what this means?" Marcus asked, settling into his chair with a satisfied sigh. "What's that?" "You're stuck with me now. Official-like, with the whole county as witnesses." Rose smiled, the first truly happy, completely unguarded smile of her young life. "Good. I was getting attached to this place anyway. Getting attached to having a real father. And I was getting attached to having a daughter who's got more courage than most grown men I know." They sat in comfortable silence, two wounded souls who had found healing in each other. The dance hall seemed like another lifetime, another girl's nightmare. This was Rose's real life. Not perfect, but honest and full of the kind of love that asks nothing in return. "Thank you," she whispered into the desert night. "For what, daughter?" "For seeing me when I was invisible. For believing I was worth saving when I didn't believe it myself." Marcus reached over and squeezed her hand. "You didn't need saving, Rose. You just needed someone to give you room to grow into who you were meant to be." In the distance, coyotes sang their ancient songs to the moon, but their voices held no loneliness now. This was home. This was family. This was redemption written in starlight and sealed with the kind of courage that changes everything. The golden slipper could keep its hollow laughter and painted smiles. Rose McKenna had found something infinitely more precious, a father's unconditional love and the fierce strength of her own unbroken heart.